This is the last fly in a series that I've been doing, short series actually, on the woolly bugger. This version I learned a long time ago from a video with Lefty Kreh and Clouser on various fly tying tips. And this one really kind of stuck with me because I had never seen the woolly bugger tied in this fashion before. But this is a way that Lefty Kreh ties it, where you reinforce the hackle, but you don't have to put in a wire. So this, like I said, is just another way of tying a woolly bugger, which there's tons of them out there. If you take a look at the book Woolly Wisdom, you will see all kinds of different versions as well as other ways that these are put together. But this is a unique way. I have not seen anybody else but him tie this way, and I just thought I'd share it. So I'm calling this the Lefty Kreh version of the woolly bugger, and I'll get started. Okay, I'm going to start the Lefty Kreh version of the woolly bugger with my hook and the vise. Again, this is a 9672 and a size 6. Mustad 9672, that is. And the thread is the same 140 Denier UTC in an olive color. Attaching my thread just behind the eye of the hook or down the shank just a little bit. I'm just going to wrap down to just past the point of the hook. For the tail, it's the same olive Marabou that I've used in the other videos. Now this one's a little bit different. Here's a technique also you'll see some people do. Depending on the feathers that you get, your Marabou and everything, sometimes you got tips that are kind of scraggly here. So if I were to put this together, it's just kind of a mess here. Well, you can help this feather along a little bit and make it certainly a usable feather by collecting all that together, and generally where the ends are right here, just pull those off. Just use your thumb right there and pull those off, and now this feather, which normally might not have worked, is now definitely a usable feather for a woolly bugger. Some of the feathers you get don't need that. I did a version of the woolly bugger last week, a more contemporary version where it was nice and fluffy and full, and that's just the nature of the beast. Feathers are a natural material, so there's no way to get all of them just perfect the way you want them. You have to go with what you have and possibly learn to modify and make them a little bit better. So there's our tail tied in. The next thing I'm going to tie in is the hackle using the same Whiting's bugger pack. This is a Grizzly olive. And I have a nice long feather here that I'm going to use for this. I'm going to use this one. I'm going to stroke this back to get those barbs kind of perpendicular, at least out of the way, so that I can then tie this in, anchor that tip in. Now, the more contemporary, what I call the more contemporary woolly bugger, which I did videos on last week, would put in a wire to reinforce the hackle. As I mentioned, if you tie a woolly bugger, normally the hackle is going to be anchored at one end and at the other end. Without a wire, like the original version had no wire in it, without that wire, something breaks that rachis, the whole thing comes unraveled. One way of getting around that and protecting that a little bit is to put that wire in. There's another way, and this is, as I mentioned in the introduction, the way I saw Lefty Kreh do this one time, and it makes perfect sense. Once you see it, it's kind of funny. It's one of those things where you're like, why didn't I think of that? So now I'm going to tie in my chenille, and this is very similar to the Russell Blessing version of this. Moving my thread pretty much all the way up to maybe half an eye length or so behind the eye of the hook. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the two materials, the Hackle and the chenille, getting those right next to each other here. I'll then take my Hackle pliers. I use a little bit stouter Hackle pliers for this because you want to keep this all under good tension. Keeping the chenille right along that rachis. I'm going to grab both of those and I'm going to start twisting it up. This does two things. It gets that chenille twisted up, makes it a little rounder, but it also twists up the Hackle with the chenille. Now I'm just going to apply this just like you normally would. Each time I come around, I'm going to make certain I'm not laying down any of those barbs, or I minimize how many of those barbs I could be laying down here by trying to stroke those back out of the way. You just keep wrapping this in just like you normally would, and then you'd be surprised if you wrap that up pretty good and tight, and just how much this looks like a regular old woolly bugger. Now, one thing you can do here, if you want, you can anchor off that chenille, trim the chenille out, because I like my woolly buggers to have a little bit of a broad face on them. What you can do here is then take that Hackle and put a few more wraps right up front, just like this, if you have enough Hackle still left over to get that broad face that you're looking for. I'm going to anchor that Hackle in here, 2 or 3 good wraps, sweeping all of that back. Go ahead and wrap that in. Sometimes you get a few of those sticking out. We'll trim those out here. Take that Hackle, kind of fatigue that a little bit. Should just pop out. A little on the stiffer side of that rachis, so I'll go ahead and just cut that out. It can look a little messier. Than a regular woolly bugger. And I'm not really taking a lot of care with the head on this because I'm more interested in showing you the technique than tying a perfect internet-ready fly. So as I said, I got a little bit of an empty spot right over here, some right there. So it isn't a nice uniform wrapped woolly bugger like some of the others that I've already done, but it's an interesting technique because you don't have to mess with the wire or anything, and you can quickly wrap that up and you've got a very, very serviceable woolly bugger. And these hackles won't come out. The video that I mentioned between him and Bob Clouser that they did, he actually takes some pliers and starts pulling at the chenille and that barbs here, and he's pulling out chunks of it, and the fly's not all falling apart. So that's just another way of doing it. Like I said, that was the whole point of this series, was just to show a number of different ways how you can tie the infamous woolly bugger. That's the Lefty Kreh version of the woolly bugger. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned at least a new pattern, if not a new technique, maybe a tip or trick here and there. If you have any questions about this fly or any of the techniques used in constructing this pattern, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you go to the trouble to ask a question, I'll go to the trouble to answer it. If you'd like to help dressed irons, please share this video with your friends and anybody you think that might enjoy this pattern. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong.